Transform your project milestones, historical events, or process flows into stunning visual stories by building an interactive timeline right within Webflow. Let's dive in and create a captivating timeline that guides your users chronologically through your content. Start by opening a new Webflow project or navigating to your existing one. We'll begin by adding a section to house our timeline. Click the Add Elements button and drag a section onto your canvas. Inside this section, we need a structure for our timeline from the Add Elements panel. Drag a div block into your newly created section. This will be our main container for the entire timeline. Now, let's set up the core of the timeline, the individual timeline items inside the main div block. We'll add another div block. This will represent a single point or event on our timeline. Paste this new div block multiple times to create several event placeholders. Time to style our timeline container. Select the main timeline div block and give it a relevant class name like Timeline Container in the Style panel. Set its display to Flexbox and align items to the center. We'll then add some padding at the top and bottom to give our timeline some breathing room. Let's get our individual timeline items looking sharp. Click on one of the nested div blocks and name its class, Timeline Item. Set its width to a fixed value, for example, 300 pixels, and give it some margin on the right to separate it from the next item. We'll also add a bit of padding inside each item. Now, for the connecting line of our timeline, go back to the Timeline Container div block in the Style panel. Under the Background section, add a solid background color that will act as your timeline's main line. Ensure this color is distinct. We'll adjust its height to be quite thin, perhaps 2 pixels, and set its width to 100%. We need to position our timeline items above or below this line. Select the Timeline Item div block under Position Settings. Change its position to relative now. We can fine-tune the vertical placement for alternating items. You'll use negative and positive margin top values to create the staggered effect. Let's add content to our timeline events inside each timeline item div block. Drag a heading element for the event title and a paragraph element for its description. You can then style these elements to fit your design. We'll also add a small circular element using a div block to mark each event point on the timeline line. Style your marker div block to be a small circle with a background color position it absolutely within its parent timeline item. To sit perfectly on the timeline line, adjust its top and left values to ensure it's centered on the line. You can also add a subtle box shadow for depth. Finally, let's make it interactive. Select the timeline item div block and go to the Interactions panel. Set up a mouse hover interaction. When hovered, you can trigger an animation, such as a slight scale-up or a subtle color change, to draw attention to each event. This brings your timeline to life.